is actually 7 o'clock now. Hello. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to open the meeting now. I'm not actually on the first page of the agenda. In fact, I'm a long way from it. Have we got any paper ones? It's much easier to run the meeting from a paper agenda. Okay, have we got any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair.
Except that Caroline is planning to come, but might be a bit late.
As far as I'm aware, she will be coming fairly shortly.
Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Has anyone got anything to, anyone who's here, got anything to say about the minutes? No? Okay.
Quick show of hands.
Yes, quick show of hands. If you were here. Okay, were you here, Lou? You were? Good. Okay, are there any declarations of interest? Nope. And are there any public questions?
There's no public questions, no member questions.
Great. Okay, on to the first item, which is item 33, community energy schemes. Over to you, Mari.
Thank you. So the climate emergency team have spent some time over the past few months looking into community energy schemes. This action within the CEAP was red last year, so we're really keen to move it towards green for this year's progress report. Research into these schemes has included speaking to a range of organisations, from charities, government-funded bodies and existing local energy groups. One of the organisations we've spoken to was the Reading Community Energy Society, and I'm really pleased that tonight Tony Cowling from here is here to provide some more information on community energy schemes and how they've been working in Reading. So I'll hand over to Tony now.
Right. I'm not sure I can switch something like that on. It's outside my comfort zone and training. So I'm green active in Reading, and they sometimes call me the founder of Reading Hydro, which is quite a nice thing because there was a small group of us that founded that, but the other 5 moved away, so I was left on my own, and the project managed to come to fruition. I also run something in Reading called Draft Busters, which is draft proofing for people in energy poverty. And today I've been messing about trying to set up a charities hub in Reading, which is a kind of community workspace where charities can go and have lower cost offices, shared facilities, all that sort of thing. And the idea is that they will work together rather than compete, stuff like that. It's quite a nice thing to be setting up. And probably 15 years ago, I helped with something in Reading which we called Reading Energy Pioneers, helping people to get solar panels on the roofs of their houses at the very beginning of feed-in tariff. And so we said to them, we will help you, we'll get you quotes, we'll get you discounts, we'll do everything. And we did 42 solar installations before the bubble struck and everybody wanted solar. And they were at 10% discount and it worked brilliantly. That scheme fell because of the bubble and they didn't want to give us discounts and they were too busy to talk to us anyway. And we reinvigorated that scheme and formed it into Reading Community Energy Society, which was solar PV again, and we were doing schools, charities, council buildings and churches. So we had 4 kind of clients that we were aiming at. We borrowed the money from people in the local community and bought solar panels with them, stuck them on the buildings. I don't know whether we want to go for the next slide because I'm kind of waffling. Oh, this is go back one. That's the directors and stuff, local investors. Yeah, we also have a community fund, which is a key output. I don't know whether I'm standing in a bad place for you.
No, you're fine.
You can see the other screen as well. So the schemes work brilliantly. The first round of installations was no schools. We were disappointed about that. We said to the schools, would you like solar panels? We will put them on your roof free, so it doesn't cost you anything. It will reduce your energy costs, so you're reducing your energy costs at no cost. And nobody wanted them. I couldn't believe it. It sounds too much like a scam. That's the trouble with it. It just sounds exactly like a scam, and so you can't possibly be doing that. The people in the first scheme that we had, which were several charities, some council buildings, some churches, they are paying 8p a kilowatt hour for their electricity now, and that's 8 years ago. That 8p is fixed for 24 years, so they don't have a price increase on energy they buy from us. It just sounds mad now. It sounds completely mad. How can you possibly have done that? And it was easy because feed-in tariff was there. Our investors get 5% return on their investment, except it's inflation linked. I'm an investor, and I get 7% on my investment now, and I think it's too much. And I'm chairman of Reading Community Energy Society. I'm going to say to them, I think we should cap that interest for our members at 7% and put the rest in the community fund, because we're donating 15, 20 grand a year to local energy projects, which could just about include Woking if you wanted to apply. We do green things. We've done like heat pumps, LED lights, school, green outdoor classrooms, also anything that's green you can apply for a grant for. It's usually quite a small grant because we like to kind of spread the love a bit. So that's how it works. It's a brilliant scheme. We have a guy who works as an energy manager locally, and he does the financial model. He works everything out so that we don't make a loss. We can't make it break even, because if you make it break even, then you might make a loss. So we have that little buffer, and we donate to local charities, and that's where we don't make profit for the members. Let's go for the next one. So yeah, how we work. We raise the money by a community share offer, so we put that out. Would you like to invest in this scheme? We'll give you 5% return on your investment, and over the 20 years normally of the scheme, you get all your money back plus interest. So at the end of the scheme, you're completely paid off. And we buy solar panels, put them on the roof, and the electricity sales, they were fixed, they're no longer fixed. They're inflation linked now because feed-in tariff is gone, we can't do that. We've got export income, which is when electricity is surplus to requirement in the building, it goes to the grid. And that's now becoming very interesting. We're getting paid, normally you get 5p per kilowatt hour if you're exporting electricity to the grid as a domestic supplier, or even as a commercial supplier. The government pulled the plug on it and said the minimum can be nothing, but normally you can sell electricity for more than 5p kilowatt hour. We were at one point selling for 17p kilowatt hour to the national grid and 8p to the consumer. And so we said to them, how about you give it all to us, because we can make more money on it. And then we have something feed-in tariff income. That's gone now. That's quite high, the feed-in tariff income. A very useful subsidy, and it's made everything work. And then we have to pay running costs, we have to pay investors' return, and we have a community fund. So that's where our money goes. And all that adds together, and it works brilliantly. Go try the next one, I think. So what we've done so far, £540,000 investment in 3 phases. Phase 4 share offer is about to launch, and it's going to be for putting on £400,000 of solar panels on one roof. We'll put £250,000 on, and somebody else is going to put the other 150. So it's a little bit complicated and difficult. This one is just around the corner, which I think is probably in Wokingham. It's a very nice organisation that helps children who kick the teacher. They take them there, but they've got 2 sets of solar panels. This is one of the big churches in Reading. Those are east-west facing solar panels. I think that might be True Food Co-op in Reading that sells food, not packaged with plastic and all that nice stuff. And they all work nicely. Yeah, I think I said most of that one now. Going too fast, I'll be gone soon. So what we hope to do is support the growth in renewable energy within both Henley and Woking. We've got a Henley scheme going. We've got a kind of tacit agreement with Woking that we can do them here, and they've thrown us a few crumbs that have never materialised yet. We like engaging new local people and installing more renewables, so we will promote. So if people phone us up and say, can you help us, we will give them some direction and stuff. There's some good solar installers around. There's actually one in Wokingham that's good. One of my hobbies is called energy use reduction. Not many people like that for a hobby, but I love it. Reducing energy means that you save money, and it also means you save energy, save carbon emissions, all sorts of stuff. And we like to support local sustainable initiatives. We do that, and it's nice to have money to do it with. We actually find it quite difficult to donate the money that we've got because we had a committee and somebody was helping us, and we're mainly interested in moving forward installing solar panels. I think we're nearly done. Try the next one. Oh, that's our customer base. These numbers are kilowatts, kilowatt peak of solar. So we've mostly got stuff on education. We've got several schemes at the Reading University. We've got one on the university farm, so that probably counts as agriculture. The Reading Library's got them on. There's a Museum of English Rural Life. Loads of it. So it's quite a nice mix of customers. Next one. We are doing well with this. I tend to go too fast, I'm afraid. So they've done the total generation is 420 megawatt hours. That's a lot of electricity, and the carbon saved 88 tonnes. 13 community grant funds so far, 15,000. So that's roughly £1,000 each. Some of them get more, some of them get less. I love that. Go for the next one. So the most recent installation was at Reading University, 74 kilowatts, free install for the university, so they pay nothing. I think if you come to us now, we make you pay £100 because it's less like a scam if you paid us some money, and then that helps us do the financial model and it gets you buy-in. The preferential PPA is power purchase agreement price, and the university is incredible because they've got one electricity meter for the whole of Reading University campus, which means if you generate any electricity with solar panels on the campus, it never goes back into the grid. And so 100% use on campus. Normally we assume 80%, but schools is less because they're not there in the summer, and that's when most is generated. And this is our share for the last one was £97,000 money raised, and we raised that almost entirely within the local area, and 5% target returns. I think years 1 to 3 we do 4% because it's a bit difficult for us in the first stages, sometimes teething problems, and we need to get things ironed out. But for year 4 to 25, 5% is a nice return, and you get your money back. So it's a good investment. Next one. Oh, this is energy profiles. These are a bit complicated, these graphs. LO22 is London Road Campus, building number 22. And that's showing there the grid kilowatts is the blue one, so they use it at night and in the morning and in the evening and through the night. In the daytime, they're entirely using solar electricity to run. They don't need any grid electricity to run their building. And that's probably on a summer's day. This might be on a winter's day where the green is helping them to reduce their peak. And I love that kind of graph. I think they're quite complicated, and this thing is hours during the day, and they're at different periods. It's even different buildings, but it gives you an idea of what's going on. You can pump these things out from all solar panel installations now. Loads of graphs and charts. Next one. Reading Buses is our next installation, the £400,000 one, and we will do them loads of good. And when this line goes below the thing, that's when they're exporting to the grid, and that's almost nothing compared with the amount that they've generated. So Reading are getting electric buses, and it's a great project, that.
They're charging buses?
They will be charging buses at Reading Buses, and we will be doing, hopefully, well, I'm trying to talk to them about it, but I think they should charge the buses with solar, like have 1 or 2 buses parked there, charge them up when the sun's shining, and then drive them out when they're full and put another one in. But they have to manage that. They use quite a lot of electricity. They can use the electricity to pump gas, compress natural gas or gas from the gas main, and they use that to run the buses for, which is quite clever because they don't pay VAT on the fuel with either the electricity or the gas. And they're a good organisation, Reading Transport. Next one. Well, we love partnerships, so we'd like to have a partnership with Woking to do this kind of thing. We're a small society. We're only like less than £1 million. We're going to be getting towards £1 million. The shared opportunities with local authorities, businesses and local communities, we love doing something shared. Like the university couldn't put solar panels on that new building. They didn't have the budget or money for it. And so we said, we will pay for the solar panels, we will put them on. The planning permission said you should have them on and everything. And so it works great. They can buy them back from us. And I think one of our installations is going to probably do a buyback. And they get a slight penalty because it's such a good thing for our investors. They have to pay 125% of the residual cost of the solar. So each year it depreciates a little bit. But then we want 25% extra because we've had a kick in the teeth by losing that installation. And it's all written down. Some people want 140% for buyout clauses. So we're kind of happy with that one. Promotions of funding stream that recognise community benefits. We love that. I like to have lots of community benefit. If we had things in Wokingham, although we're called Reading Community Energy Society, there'd be something called Wokingham Community Energy Society. All the solar panels in Wokingham would feed into a community fund that was only allowed to be spent in Wokingham area. So you wouldn't be subsidising us and we wouldn't be subsidising you. It's kind of, they can do it all in bookkeeping and accountancy and all that stuff. We like the idea of coordinating with you, sharing resources and data, kind of best practice support and understanding what's going on. We have an organisation that supports us, which is a umbrella energy for all community with 22 co-ops in it, and they do loads of good stuff for us. They do our accounts, they do our legal stuff, they help us with share offers, marketing, all sorts of stuff, and they are useful to have. They, as a director or chairman of the board, they save you so much work, it's ridiculous. We have to pay them money for that. I think that's the next one. It might be the last one, this one. Yeah, further information, readingenergy.coop, that's the website. If you want to email us, info@readingenergy.coop, and if you're sneaky, you can get me and phone me up or email me. I'm much better at being emailed than I am being phoned up. But if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer questions now. Or if you think, oh dear, I wish I'd asked him that, then send it another day and I'll gradually answer it. I usually answer emails the same day, but I sometimes get too many to manage that, but they never stay there long. So if you've got questions or I'm not good at doing it, I don't know whether, I think you can just ask questions straight to me. I'm happy. I can control you lot.
You control the one and share.
Oh, is it
Yes, yes. Peter.
Thank you, Tony. That was good presentation, as you say, whistle stop, but very interesting. Your big box with the different building types.
Yeah.
I couldn't see residential there, so it looks
No,
like
we
it's just
do not do residential. We only do commercial. Residential, the financial model is not geared for residential. At the moment, it's economic for people to do it on their own. For a few years, it wasn't, but now it's come back since the price hike. Yeah. Yeah, so no residential, we exclude residential. We used to exclude businesses, but we now include businesses because the same financial model works for a business as for a charity. And so we'd like to have lots of businesses in Reading doing it.
I have another, if I may. Do you do storage as well, or is it just solar panels?
I'm a bit belligerent about storage, I'm afraid, and the Reading Hydro, we had a discussion about it there. And my view on energy storage is that whatever you're storing it is not 100% efficient. So now you've got energy, you store it, and you lose some storing it, you lose some getting it back. And so, as a nation, if we store energy, we use more than if we didn't store it. So let's not store it. That's how I see it. That's first principles. The government don't see it like that, I'm afraid. I see it that we should put the energy into the grid and then let something not generate it that would have been generating and save 100% of that. It's quite interesting. They are starting to talk about batteries, but if they get me on it, if you start putting in the replacement cost of the batteries into the financial model of batteries, they don't quite work so well as if you kind of ignore the fact that you just capitalised it and get return on investment, and then you don't worry about what happens when the battery. So we do not do battery storage because I'm grumpy about it.
You got another one?
I do have one other question, but not for Tony. So should we finish the questions for Tony and then I'll come in afterwards?
Yes, let's finish the questions for Tony. I think Moses was next. And then you.
Yeah, go. What was it? Sorry.
Hi, Tony. I'm just curious though, if you installed 74 kilowatt peak for Reading University and they paid nothing.
Yeah.
I estimate that's about 60k. So how do you make the money back?
It's very clever. So we paid £60,000 for that. Well, actually, we paid £97,000 for that installation. I don't know why, but we paid lots of money for it. And they buy electricity off us. So when the sun shines and electricity is generated, they buy that electricity off us. And it's, I'm not sure exactly what the money is, but let's say it's 15 pence a kilowatt hour. And so we've got that money coming into us every time they use sun. And there's also some strange money that I don't understand, which is called REGOs, Renewable Energy Generated Obligation or something. They pay us money as well. So we get two income streams coming from those solar panels. And by the end of the 20 years, we've got all our money back. We paid our investors 5% and we've done a community fund. It's a phenomenal deal. It's just like some sort of business thing. Just work it out and it works.
Okay, yeah, so it's not actually free. There's a PPA and they pay you over 20-25 years.
Yeah, there's an agreement with power purchase.
And they pay you per kilowatt.
So they don't pay any money.
Upfront.
Effectively, they buy the panels for us, and at the end, everything's gone. And I didn't mention this, but once we finish with those panels, like 20 years, we're not interested in those panels anymore, so we give them to the host building. These are your panels, this is your inverter, this is your system. And from then on, they get free solar electricity. Accountants think solar panels last 25 years. But I've seen them come back off a North Sea buoy doing this in salt water, and they're still 98% as efficient as they were when they went out. And so the panels are going to last a long time. The inverters are probably 15 years, maybe, have to replace that. But that's a brilliant, brilliant scheme. And the host buildings are going to be in like dreamland when they don't have to pay for electricity anymore.
Yeah, thank you. I know solar will last 30 to 35 years.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, guys.
Okay, Adrian.
Thank you. Brilliant presentation. I had a couple of questions. You said you'd like to partner with Wokingham. I didn't know whether you meant the council or Wokingham in general.
It is really with the council that we've been talking. Nothing's happened yet. We haven't done a joint scheme with Wokingham. We've done lots with Reading and we've helped people in other places. We would like to do a joint scheme, and you can go and do it on your own. There's nothing to stop you setting up a community energy society, call it Wokingham Community Energy Society, just do it all yourself. We're already doing it. We've got financial models, we've got expertise, we've got supply chains. We roughly speaking know what we're doing, and we've proved our track record. So you can kind of run off the back of that. You can just say we'd like to do whatever it is, this academy school, and we'd be there next week doing it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And so when, for example, you do schools in Reading or leisure centres in Reading, that's with the council as a partner, is it?
Yes, the council they are an investor, and they are a partner in that they've got two councillors on our board of directors because they've got big interest in it, and we've got one person who's an advisor to the board who's council, and we use the council offices. There's no real exchange of money between us, but there is a kind of a working agreement which I find works extremely well.
Yeah, sounds good. So there's a model there that we could look at. And,
you can
thank you.
definitely.
And my other question was, if we want to do this at a similar scale, do we need to find another Tony, or do we?
We would be helping you do it, I think.
Yeah.
That's the simple thing. Like, you can have your own committee and meetings, and you can even have your own board. Yeah. But effectively, we would be partnering with you and doing an awful lot of it. Certainly for the first few. Yeah. And we've got capacity to do that. We can kind of flick the switch. With any of these things, it's always a good idea to get 2 or 3 quotes. As due diligence, I go out to 3 solar companies every time we want to do an installation, and we've got a favoured installer. I've never been able to beat his price locally, which irks me immensely because they call themselves a solar installer, but they don't install any solar panels. They manage the installation of solar panels. They can do it cheaper than anybody in Reading or Wokingham area. That's been true up until about 2 months ago when I started finding people that can do it cheaper. So it's good, and also you can go to different versions of us and find different deals. So we might not necessarily be the best deal, but we are a deal that works and we offer community benefit. There's some people that offer them to schools that I'm seriously worried about. If you want to talk to me privately, I can tell you about some bad things that are not too far away from where we are now to do with schools. But so you need to be careful what you're doing, what you're getting into, what you're signing up to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Katrine?
Thank you, and thanks very much, Tony. I guess, well, one of the questions I had was how can we as a local authority support this? But I think you've largely answered that in terms of buildings. But I guess because it sounds like such a good idea and what makes sense for everyone, what do you see as actually being the biggest blockers in the space?
We had a meeting with an MP about this, what are the blockers, and we've also had a meeting with Ofgem about it. So we've got a whole presentation about blockers. One of the things that annoys me the most is we have somebody comes and approaches us, a business. So we've got a nice roof, we'd like to put solar panels on it, we want to be green, all this stuff. And we say, yeah, it's going to work, it's going to be great, this is going to be your offer. You need to talk to your landlord about whether we can put them on the roof or not. And the landlord says, go away, don't put solar panels on my roof. And that is a massive blocker, and I'd like to see that change, because I don't think the landlord ought to be able to say you can't have solar panels on the roof of the building that you're in and reduce your energy cost just because I don't like the idea of having solar panels. That is a massive blocker. Sometimes planning permission is a blocker, not very often. Sometimes mainly listed buildings, that's for, though we have done listed buildings and curtilage of listed buildings. That idea that I said about people thinking it's a scam, that's a big blocker as well. And it does sound awfully like a scam, but it isn't. And I don't know how you can overcome that hurdle.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's somewhere that local authorities actually can help with, I guess, by being like, we're doing this as well, and showing it's a trusted.
Yeah, I think probably 25% of the buildings are Reading Council or Reading Council Quango type buildings. Yeah, so it's helpful. Well, we've got more coming in. You better make sure you finished first before you let him go.
Peter?
Just a question in terms of size limits. I know that the National Grid, as I might call them, have a limit in terms of what you can pump into to the grid.
Yeah, they do. In Oxford, there's certain areas where they cannot put any more solar panels on because there's too many already, and the grid's going to heat up going backwards. That's what they worry about. Every house can have 4 kilowatts without anybody worrying about anything, but when you get to the bigger commercial schemes, then there are problems. That 400 kilowatts for the buses, there's been no problem with that, and we've never had a problem with solar panels anywhere in Reading, and I don't think you will in Wokingham. We haven't got the coverage yet, and I would say 20 years' time we might start running into those kind of problems. There are ways of managing it, like if there are problems, you can say, okay then, we will not export when the problems exist. If the university was to shut down and use no electricity, they almost set the wires on fire going back towards the grid. And that never is going to happen, but they worry, the electricity company worries about it, and we wanted to put one more on, and they said that one has got to have a thing that says it switches off if the university switches off. And that's the only time we've come across that, and that was, it's an on paper thing, because the university's got a base load that's like massive. So, did you have it? Did I answer that question good enough?
Yeah, if the questions for Tony finished, can I ask my general?
Alex?
Yeah, the comment you made about landlords sort of made me think that the new government is planning on introducing reforms around what landlords can and can't do.
Yeah.
Like most notably, obviously, like Section 21, which I'm sure affects a lot of casework that we deal with as councillors. Have you spoken to any members of Parliament about about this issue? And is it that seems to be something that they can very easily implement in this particular piece of legislation, which they are trying to push through the House?
We have spoken to the MP for Wokingham. It's the one that goes Wokingham to Sonning, whatever that new lady is.
Early in Woodley, Yuan Yang, yeah.
So and we've spoken to other MPs in the past about it. I don't hold out a whole lot of hope, unfortunately, because there's commercial interests involved. There's all sorts of things, but I'd love it if we could get that blocker.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Peter, you may ask your question.
So the point I was going to raise is in the annual progress report. It says set up a community energy fund for Wokingham, and the carbon savings shown are 5 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, which, when I looked at that, I thought, well, why are we bothering? Because that's a very low number. So I don't think that's accurate. And it may be that perhaps that setting up a community energy fund for Wokingham is an enabler for our solar generation across the borough. So not now, but perhaps, Mary, you can have a look at the figures in there, and because it sounds like, you know, if we did partner or did do our own thing, that this would be a considerably higher carbon savings than 5 tonnes per year, and it should reflect that rather than what it shows at the moment. So perhaps if you can have a look at that and perhaps churn the numbers and see how it might help. It may be that specifically that one has no carbon savings, that it's just an enabler for one of the other sections within the report that goes solar generation.
Yeah, I know Andrew's on the call, so he might be able to provide more information on where that figure, how that was calculated. But I think you're right, given that this is progressing and like how we shape this action and actually what it covers, it probably will merit looking at that saving and refining it.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Yeah, it's obviously it's based on kilowatt hour. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head. It'll be somewhere in the documents, but obviously, yes, we would hope that would hopefully increase if, based on the scale of those examples, we were able to reach similar scales. It's basically, yeah, it would. Well, once we had a look at it, and if we were able to say that these are the kind of things that we expect to put in, and the kilowatt hours associated with that, then that's where the figure comes from. So yeah, hopefully it could increase if we're able to move forward with it.
I think the other thing just to note is even with that low carbon savings, the community energy schemes we recognise there's a number of other benefits. So it might be, you know, looking at other actions within the CAP, it is lower, but there's a lot of other benefits, you know, with the community fund that we could put back into other projects in the community, the financial benefit for those potentially that are in the property on lower electricity bills. So it's kind of, yes, even if there's a lower carbon saving, there's other benefits to look at. So it's still something that we should like look at and progress.
Is Tony?
I think my philosophy on this is that every little counts, and so no matter how small a saving it is, it's worth having, and how small things add together to make big things. So small steps.
Unfortunately, we have a massive.
Moses?
I just want to come back to Tony. So when you work with Reading Borough, what has been the structure? Has it been a PPP? How does it work? You said they are investors. How does it work?
Reading Community Energy Society it's a cooperative, so it's like a community benefit society. So that's our structure, and that is us. We partner with Reading Council. They've got 2 directors on our board, so they have input, they have voting rights, they can make agenda items, they can suggest all sorts of things. We are 1 member, 1 vote. So if you invest £1,000, £100,000 or £1, in the annual general meeting you get 1 vote for that. So we're kind of very democratic society. Normally in business, if you've got more shares, you get more votes. So in the case of a community benefit society, it's 1 member, 1 vote, 1 person, or 1 organisation, 1 vote. So that's a little bit how we work. I keep asking.
So I'm just trying to understand this financial structure. So if Reading Borough Council invest in Reading community, so in a way they invest their taxpayers' money. So how do the residents of Reading Borough benefit if they are not getting part of the energy you are producing?
The investment in the society is nothing to do with energy, it's to do with money. So if you invest £10,000, you have 5% return on that investment, and probably Reading Council have got £10,000 invested with us. So every year they will get 5% of £10,000, although it will go down each year. And so they're getting money coming back in. And the truth of the matter is the council can often borrow money at 2%. So they're investing it in us. it's like they're richer with us than without us. It's a crazy scheme, like rich people can do it. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they didn't invest more, but there's a risk because we're not entirely risk-free. We can go bankrupt, we can do all sorts of things. So we're dodgy.
Adrian.
If I understand correctly, solar generation clearly is appealing to business, and that's why people are building solar farms, and indeed Wokingham is building a solar farm. But it's at large scale. There's an awful lot of planning overhead associated with it, and it needs to be at that sort of scale in order to be worth the management time and the investment of effort that's required in it. But all over Wokingham and Reading are people with platforms up in the air where the trees can't get to them, an existing connection to the electricity grid. A lot of them are green-minded, and even if it's not for their own property, then they're green-minded to invest. And if they can do that at a 5% return, you know, without excessive risk, it's kind of a sort of everybody wins, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think the reason this has significant potential is there are lots and lots of roofs on which people would be willing to do this. And you seem to have the expertise and the will to deal with those management overheads and complexities and lack of understanding that the man in the street has. I mean, I expect a number of people around this table have put solar panels on their own roof. And it's actually quite a complicated thing to do when you do it for the first time to make sure you're doing the right thing. But having an organisation such as yours that can help navigate some of those obstacles makes it easy for people. So the potential for this is actually limitless, I think, in practical terms, and you know, could potentially scale to way beyond what we're doing with solar panels. Yeah. And my sense at the moment is that perhaps I don't know whether we didn't quite understand it well enough, or we didn't have the confidence to go further in terms of our ambition in the action plan. But it sounds like this has got significantly more potential than we've given it credit for at the moment. We need to prove that that's the case before we set targets. But it does sound like it's got enormous potential, because all the sort of component parts we need for this to become real look like they can come together. Yeah.
No, it's good. I think we will take on anything above 20 kilowatts, which is like probably 10 times the size of a house. And we're going up to that 400 kilowatts, which is that is a massive roof. It's like 5 football pitches or something up there. And yeah, the overheads and everything works out nicely for us. We just do the economics in the financial model so that it works, and all the people in our organisation are volunteers apart from Energy for All. They get paid. None of us get paid. We don't have any expenses for directors or any costs. So that gives us a slight advantage over a purely commercial organisation. I kind of look into a crystal ball, and I foresee the rent-a-roof scheme come back in the early days of feed-in tariff. 2 boys left Cambridge University. One of them was a geography student, and one of them was doing history, and they said, what should we do? And they did solar panels. They did rent-a-roof scheme, and they borrowed money from Swiss banks, put them on people's roofs. Within 3 years, they were each earning £1 million a week, and they live in the Bahamas now. And if somebody says, I'm selling my house, they just say, I'll just sell their solar panels with it, we're not interested. They're so rich, they don't even care. And that was feed-in tariff did that. And I think we can do that again, because the price hike has put the returns on investment not quite as good as they were in the early days of feed-in tariff, but they're quite good returns on investment. Like, I don't really want to quote you numbers, but I'd say 8% for a domestic scheme. That's a good return on investment. And a pension fund is operating at 3%. So all the pension funds ought to move their money into solar panels. And it doesn't take much to say free solar panels for everybody in Wokingham. You and me, we could start that business, retire to the Bahamas, except I'm a bit old to retire.
Yes, good for you. Yes.
Sorry, Tony, you mentioned Reading Hydro as well, and obviously we've got Sonning Lock, obviously down to Walgrave, Henley and so on. Did you look at other, how is that going? Was it something you'd look at again?
Reading Hydro is going brilliantly. It was an impossible project to do. And as I said, I was the founder, and we made it happen. It was hard work to make it happen. It was dodgy financial. There was cost overruns and everything. The cost overruns have been paid off by the energy price hike, so we're back to level. Investors are getting some money back, not as much as I would like them to get back, but it will work economically. I was telling the guys here earlier that myself and 2 people from Reading Hydro and another guy in Henley, we thought we'd have a look at doing a hydroelectric scheme. Actually, it's in Wokingham area, and we got a grant, we got it going, we worked out all the finances of installing it, where to do it, how to do it. The Environment Agency weren't very happy about being done on the river, so we had to do it in a field next to the river, join it up to the river and fire it off, give some of the electricity to the Greenlands campus of Reading University and some to a farm nearby. It was all economic, everything was going great. We hit the buffers with a restrictive covenant on the land which said don't build anything that might look like a house down here, please. And the National Trust enforced that covenant and told us pack your bags and go home. We didn't like it, and we'd like Wokingham to unpack those bags and build that hydroelectric scheme there. Probably it would involve going through the courts to get that covenant removed, because Viscount Hambledon put it on to stop them building Milton Keynes Mark II in the Hambledon Valley. That was the intention of the covenant, and I don't think he'd have had any objection to having a hydroelectric scheme near the river. And I think the High Court would rule that, probably a county court would rule that as well. And so that could open up, and that was one of the few schemes on the Thames that would be viable and economic and good. And it's only small, like small steps are good. I'm involved in another one in Ham, which is near Hampton Court. But there's a few. There's one already in Sonning, private guy. Again, he lives in the Bahamas on feed-in tariff income.
So it's Wokingham Borough Council that you would want to take that
I don't necessarily think it needs to be Wokingham Borough Council, but Wokingham Borough Council could be a facilitator, or even this committee could be a facilitator for that and say, is there anybody in Wokingham that likes to build a hydroelectric scheme? And we can give them all our papers and everything. And we've got things called feasibility studies, and we've got financial models, we've got everything, and we've got all the letters and paperwork, and we've got contacts with who to ask. There's a very rich guy involved who can afford better solicitors than the National Trust, except they didn't know that.
Well, I'm very keen on hydro, and my ward is the Thames ward that goes around Ranham, and so definitely would like to follow up.
Come see us. If you can find a group that was started, like myself and the other guy that were doing it, we would be like informal consultants, and we'd do loads of helping for it, because we've been down there doing level surveys of the ground and looking for newts and all that stuff.
Well, I thought that was very interesting indeed. I'm sure we can all think of businesses or parish council buildings or schools or whatever in our wards that I know I can, that want to, would like to do this sort of stuff. So, and then there's the implications for the council as well. So thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, you are free to leave. On with the next item, which is carbon sequestration, which, who is leading this?
Hello, hi, that's me.
Right.
Chair, sorry, I have a couple of questions on...
Oh, sorry, on the... Oh, sorry.
Your microphone's not on.
Sorry, yeah, I just had a couple of comments on the report. Talks about the fact that we will produce a plan for this, but no sort of time scale for that. Do you know when you have in mind for that plan to be produced?
Yeah, so there's a few significant things that are happening early this year. So we've got so the Greater South East Net Zero Hub. They are the government-funded regional body that supports South East organisations to deliver reduced energy projects. So they have, they're organising an event later this month for organisations to come together, share best practice. They've also commissioned a research project to look at how local authorities and community energy organisations can build stronger partnerships. So following those two, when we find out more from those events and that research paper, then it'll be looking at kind of moving it forward. What I think we can start looking at is actually, following this meeting, it seems like there is a general kind of support around these schemes. And so I will speak to communication teams as well as property and energy teams, and just to think actually what are those next steps. So actually, is there property within our estate that we can look at? Probably a pilot would be a good first initial step. So I think that kind of identification of what property might be a good one to use for the pilot. But I think the good thing about and also the communication side of thing, I think we can start just through the channels that we have on the Climate Emergency Hub, in our newsletter, we can start talking more about the community energy schemes. So there's a number in Reading, but we're not aware of any that exist in Wokingham. There's no limit. I think often when community energy schemes get started in boroughs, then it often triggers more to be set up, and the way they work is they all kind of support each other. So we can put communication out about, if people are interested in starting their own ones within Wokingham, but also, making them aware of local ones in Reading and whether there's any in other neighbouring authorities, which I think there's kind of initial next steps we can do in the, short term.
Yeah, I think that's good. My sense is there are quite a few people around Wokingham who would be up for this sort of thing. They're regularly sort of gathering in informal groups in the pub and the sort of green day at the church and that sort of thing. There seem to be people out there who have a need to do this sort of thing, who could come on board, with the help of Tony's group or a similar group, and a bit of sort of backing from the council.
That's it. So that's why the communication side is so important to get the message out. I think also when we spoke to the Net Zero Hub, they mentioned one of the biggest challenges in boroughs for community schemes to start and be successful is not having local authority support. So the fact that there's support in this group, and hopefully there is wider support, then that's a real enabler to hopefully get build momentum around these schemes.
And there was a reference in the report also to a dependence on the LPU being approved. I didn't quite understand why we need to sort of wait for anything to be approved.
So that was just around something that we could do, and other authorities have done, is creating community energy guidance document following. So once the local plan is adopted, there's a number of guidance documents that are created. There could be one created around community energy schemes, which we know other authorities have done. So that's just, it's kind of a separate action that we can do. It's not, the other actions aren't dependent on, the local plan update.
Thank you.
Peter.
Just picking up what Aidan was saying, it just seems sensible to, they've got a model that works, they've got a process that works. Why wouldn't we work with them to expand their footprint to cover the whole of Wokingham and to work closely with them? It doesn't seem sensible to set up our own thing just because it's called Reading, that we should work with them, even if it's an offshoot. But they've got a model, let's work with them.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and I think when I say about new groups, it's community led. So if there's just an interested group that want to set up their they want to create a new group, it would be the community. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be the Wokingham Council. When I said about that, but yeah, I think it seems like that's the best first step, isn't it? Working with them.
Okay, nothing more about that item. Thank you, Mary. Okay, now we're going to go on to carbon sequestration.
Hello, hi, thanks. Hi everyone. So for those of you who haven't met, my name's Laura Buck. I'm the Green Infrastructure Service Manager. I'm here mainly this evening to support with any questions in relation to priority 4 of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which covers carbon sequestration. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a look through the 5th progress report, which outlines the progress across the actions within this area. But just to summarise, some of the key achievements for this priority area so far include almost 46,000 trees have been planted over 17 hectares of land since 2021 when the project was initiated. This figure is expected to reach 60,000 trees across 32 hectares by the end of the planting season, which is coming to an end in March this year, as we're due to carry out 2 larger scale schemes over the coming planting season. And this figure relates as well just solely to newly planted trees that have been carried out in collaboration with schools, town and parish councils, non-for-profit organisations, community groups, and with support from the Woodland Trust grant that the council's in receipt of. That's their Woodland Trust Emergency Tree Fund. It's worth noting that this figure doesn't relate to any trees that are planted as a requirement for development schemes. The tree strategy was developed and is now fully adopted, and it's already supporting officers in making decisions to support with improvement of management and maintenance of trees across the borough, to support with carbon sequestration, biodiversity, and the wider environmental benefits they can achieve. You'll see that many of these actions are still ongoing, but through the work that's already been delivered, we've been able to build some really positive relationships with the likes of the Woodland Trust and the local organisations or community groups. So we hope that those relationships will help us to continue with some of those ongoing actions. And officers continue to engage with internal and external stakeholders to identify and consider opportunities to contribute to these actions, many of which will be delivering dual benefits. So, for example, where areas are considered for new schemes, these are developed with a view to maximise as many of the actions in the action plan as possible, deliver carbon sequestration benefits alongside things like biodiversity opportunities as well. That's kind of just a quick summary, but like I said, hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at the 5th progress report. And as I said, I'm here really just to answer if there's any questions that anyone specifically had.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you for the report, Laura. I'm not sure if I should declare an interest. I'm a member of the Woodland Trust, but I'm not a director of it. So I like trees. It's good to see more trees being planted for the sequestration. I do have a question though. With our local plan update, there are large areas of farmland which are going to be built on, so Hall Farm in particular. You'll be well aware that grassland, farmland are also carbon sinks and kind of contribute to taking carbon out of the atmosphere. With the local plan update, we're going to lose large areas of farmland. Are we taking that into account? Effectively, it's a negative against the positives of the planting trees we've got here. Are we taking into account that loss of carbon sinks in the figures that we have? And maybe that's a question for Andrew rather than yourself. But is it, are we taking that into account because we are losing carbon sinks as part of the local plan update?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Left with one. Thank you for that, Peter. Yeah, I've been working with the LPU team to look at the proposed allocations, particularly around Hall Farm. And it is worth noting that Hall Farm is proposed to deliver more than mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain through the development of a very, very large new country park. The borough the Reading University are obviously always pointing out to me that it actually will be the largest country park in the county once it's complete. And I expect that in terms of net woodland and trees, in terms of that SDL site, I would imagine it would be a positive rather than a loss. I appreciate that farmland is a carbon sink, but you do have to remember also that the farmland that the university manages on Hall Farm now is very intensive. So it's an intensive research dairy herd they run there. So I think that it's likely that when you look at what the carbon sequestration of that intensive farmland is, it's pretty poor compared with permanent grassland. So a lot of the carbon benefits of that farmland are lost because they tend to reseed regularly with ryegrass lays rather than having a sort of permanent pasture approach. Is there anything else you had on that one, Peter, you want to talk about?
No, thank you. That was very comprehensive.
Adrian?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I looked at all the numbers in the update, And I think you said we're on track for 60,000 new trees by the end of this planting season. If I remember correctly, the borough's target was 250,000. I'm not sure by when. Was it by 2030? So I'm wondering, are we sort of progressing at the right level? Have we got whatever investment we need to progress at the right sort of level to hit that? And I think, is it 170 hectares we're aiming for in the climate plan as well? So are we on track to hit those sort of figures by 2030? Do we know? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the target did change. So originally it was a target of 250,000, but part of the initial work we carried out was looking at feasibility of how achievable that was. So, you know, we needed to look at what land is available from council, what land is available potentially from private landowners. So since that work, that's why the target has changed now to 170 hectares. I don't believe there's a specific time frame target on that. Essentially, the way the project and the actions were set up was that it was split up into multiple phases. So first phase was looking at some of the smaller scale sites that we could carry out some of these sort of almost quick wins scenarios while we develop the larger scale site. To sort of identify those smaller areas. So that phase one of it is complete. Phase two is which we're in at the moment, is where we were looking at the larger scale sites. So as I said, those two that we're looking to carry out at the moment, this planting season will be contributing to that 60,000 figure, are those larger scales. From our perspective, yes, we are working we're going in the right direction, and we're making as quick progress really as we can within the resource that we've got and also the land availability we've got. What we've got to do is I think what's important to remember is that we are making decisions. We need to make those decisions about tree planting schemes to maximise all benefits that can be achieved, as opposed to just planting with trees. That can be done, you know, relatively quickly if the land's available there. But we need to make sure that those schemes are going to be successful in the long term, and also they're delivering the multiple benefits, as I said, about, you know, around biodiversity. So from our perspective, yes, we are on track, and you'll see on the progress report most of those actions are all in green because we've already made good progress and are continuing to make progress with those.
Yeah, I guess we need a bit of clarity as to is there a target for a particular year, and if so, is that the target we're going to hit, or are there good reasons for not having the target tied into a particular year? I'm still not quite clear what the answer to that is.
Do you want me to pick up that, Adrian?
Yes, please.
I just want to add to what Laura said. Yeah, Laura's right. There is, when we set that target as a council, we did not put an end date to when we would deliver it. We just had it as an aim. Now, I think it might be sensible to look at including an end date at some point, and we can do that as we work through the CAP process with Mari's team. In terms of the progress, it's true to say that we haven't identified all of the sites that we need to meet that target yet, but we've got plenty of sites for the next few planting seasons in the pipeline, and we think that we will be making similar progress in the next couple of years towards that target.
Okay, thank you.
Moses.
I think I'm following from where Adrian left. We intend to plant 170 hectares, and we've only done 17 according to the progress report. So we are 10%. So if we are aiming for 2030, there's an implicit target date. So are we going to complete 90% in the next 5 years?
I suppose that leads on from what Andy was saying in terms of we haven't set a deadline for those hectares to be achieved. It's that we're aiming to continue to make progress in the same way that we have been doing so far. And I think we've been maximising our opportunities that have been available to us. Part of the tree strategy work as well, as was about producing tree planting opportunity area maps, which the teams will continue to look at as well, and to identify some of those larger scale schemes. But ultimately, it will be about what's available for us to be able to plant on. And like I said, hopefully we're going to be continuing. We feel that we will be continuing in the same sense as we have been in terms of the progress.
let me be a bit more specific. We have achieved 10%, and we have 5 years to 2030. Do we realistically think we can achieve 170 hectares in 5 years?
Shall I pick that one? I think it's right to say that we're not going to achieve the other 90% in the next 5 years. I think that whilst it's included as part of the CAP, the carbon sequestration part of the CAP, it's not necessarily restricted to the CAP timelines. So it was a project that we brought forward separately to the CAP, but it's been incorporated. So I don't think that we would be saying to you or this committee that we're going to complete all of the 170 hectares in the next 5 years.
Alex.
Thank you. This kind of, again, follows on from the questions that have just been asked, but I think one of the things I've found a bit difficult about preparing for these meetings is the RAG system that you're using. I think it would be quite helpful if there was so currently what you've got is an action-based RAG. So it's based on the specific actions that you've listed that you believe need to be taken in order to achieve the target that you've set out. But as has been highlighted, in terms of actual progress, in terms of outcome, and in terms of CO2 equivalent reduction, this looks like a red to me. If we've started in 2021 and we're trying to go to 2030, we're halfway through, we've achieved 10%. I would call that a red, but I'm not an expert on these things. This is a much broader question than just this meeting and just the carbon sequestration, but could, in future iterations or perhaps as a separate report, is it worth looking into where we are in terms of the RAG on outcomes? Because I think that's quite, in some cases you're going to find like this, where we're green in action, but, potentially red in outcome. You may actually find that you're the opposite way around in some other areas. Like, for example, I imagine something like electric vehicle uptake, that is kind of happening anyway because of national government incentives. So perhaps it could be possible that we're not meeting our actions there, but the outcomes are being achieved anyway. So I think separating those two out in terms of how we're traffic lighting each stage of this would be quite useful. I wondered if any of you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can pick that one up. So we are actually looking at the CAP at the moment and looking at the format of it. Specifically, we've had conversations today around the RAG status. I think this comes, there's been previous meetings where it's been mentioned, what is that RAG status showing? I think, again, tonight, you're right, it does kind of highlight, it's not that clear, is it, on are we achieving that overall aim? So maybe there's a RAG status we put against that overall aim, so that 170 hectares, but instead of having a RAG against the actions, we can do a delivery status, like a lot of projects use. But yeah, I think it's a good point, and we can look at it as part of that CAP update. So for the progress report that goes out this year.
Thank you. And I just have one more question on this specific item. It said there were you encountered some delays due to archaeological investigations. Have we found a dead king in Barkham? I just wondered what. I don't know if I'm being silly here. I don't know what those were.
No, it was just as depending on where the schemes are located. Obviously, we need to do a variety of survey work. So one of the particular schemes, the COVID Memorial Scheme, which is located in Barkham, because of its size and its location, the county archaeologists wanted us to carry out an archaeological survey, and it was also required as part of the Forestry Commission environmental impact assessment screening as well. That was carried out, and there was actually, from our view, one very minimal findings. We carried out an initial geophys survey, which is basically is non-intensive, and it's mainly just done from above ground. The report generally, from our perspective, was, like I said, minimal findings, but the county archaeologists just wanted us also to carry out some trenching across the site. Because of that caused some delays, because not because of any of the findings, but actually because of the resource capacity within the county archaeologist department. So just put a little bit of pressure on the timescale. But all of those surveys have now been completed, and we've got the support from the county archaeologist and from Forest Commission through the EIA, and we're good to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, just to repeat, because I didn't quite catch it. Who was the organisation or authority who asked you to carry out those investigations?
It was a bit of both. So the Forestry Commission wanted that to be concluded as part of our environmental impact assessment screening.
Okay.
And because it was adjacent to the Barking Solar Farm, the county archaeologist was involved in that planning application. The scheme isn't connected to the planning application, but because they were involved in that, they also wanted us to carry out investigations onto the planting site as well.
Okay.
So it was a bit of both, really.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so is everyone happy with this now? Okay, thank you very much, Laura. We go on to Ecological Emergency Progress Report.
That's me again, isn't it?
Yes. Hello, Andy.
Excellent. Right. Hiya. Hi, everyone. My name's Andy Glencross. Most of you will have met me before. I've been with the council a very, very long time. And I appreciate that I've come here tonight to talk to you about the action we've been taking towards the recent ecological emergency motion. Now, it is really quite recent. It was only January last year that we actually took the motion. It's when you had a year of actual activity. I think I've given you a written report, so I'm happy to answer questions on it. I would probably draw your attention to a couple of things. One of the things that Laura mentioned, which is there's a real cross benefit of the ecological emergency with some of the CAP actions and the carbon sequestration particularly. I would like to also make you aware, because having been here a long time as well, that actually the council has a very, very strong record of working to improve the borough's biodiversity over the last 20 or 30 years. I've given a few examples in the report. Happy to answer any questions or talk about more stuff if anyone's interested. And the only other thing I'd like to say is, I think going forward, it's something that really dovetails well with the Climate Emergency Action Plan as well, in terms of a lot of the actions will effectively have dual benefits. So I think this is the right committee to oversee this sort of area as well. So on that note, if you've got any questions on the report, then please feel free to fire them in my direction.
Alex.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. I didn't realise we'd moved on to the next item. I thought we'd moved on to the next bit of the report. Can I save my questions on the sequestration bit to the end and come back to it? I don't want to ruin the momentum we've got going in the other way now. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I've got 5 or 6 questions. Can I just sort of slot them in at the end? Is that okay?
I don't know. Do it now. Yes.
Do it now.
Do it now.
Okay, right. Sorry, apologies. That was my fault. So going back to the carbon sequestration, the total carbon savings estimated is 4,360, and the total spend is 2.5 million, which works out as £573 per tonne. When you look in the transport section, it's 4.6 million for 84,000 tonnes, which works out as £54 per tonne. So we're spending 10 times more per tonne on this section than we are on transport. I didn't check with other sections. I don't know what the reasoning behind that is, and whether it's kind of, I don't know, I'm a bit of an economist on things like this, but it seems like in terms of bang for your buck, that money could potentially be better spent, or maybe I'm being overly simplistic. I don't know if anybody has a response to that question.
Alec, I'll come in first. I know Andrew's going to tell us about exactly how those calculations are done, but the thing I was going to remind you about is that yes, it may look expensive in terms of the pure carbon saving, but it delivers other benefits that we were just talking about, doesn't it, in terms of the tree planting and all the benefits of trees in general, and the biodiversity improvements as well. So whilst that money might seem a lot for just the carbon, you just remember it does deliver the other things as well. Andrew.
Yeah, no, thanks. That is definitely true. I think the thing for the cost is those are all the costs to the council. So obviously for things like carbon sequestration for these projects, it is being funded primarily by the council. And obviously a lot of it is actually grant funding. So if you think about it in terms of that, obviously the grant funding is obviously sort of free for the council, obviously office time and that kind of thing. So in that respect, it is a very good value for money. In general, actually, if you look at it for like the cost to the council and stuff, the cost in general, trees are one of the more cost-effective things overall. I think for the transport section, it's likely because, like I say, we as a council are investing some money in supporting infrastructure and comms and all the actions there, but actually a lot of the savings are from the people who will go out and buy the cars themselves. So we support with the infrastructure, but we're not buying cars for people. If we were to be doing that, that would obviously massively increase the cost there, and that's why it maybe is seeming a little bit different. Steve?
Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, someone.
Did Steve want to come in on
go
that?
ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So for those that don't know me, Steve Brown, Interim Service Director for Environment and Safety. Just to pick up on the point of cost, there is another side to that, which is we are a local authority. We sort of set out an agenda. We go out and talk to public groups. We utilise the Prosperity Board. We reach out into our communities. And the fact that we're doing this also gives us some credibility, gives us some traction to enable those debates. So you're quite right that there is always a cost. And as a public service, we're acutely aware of costs. But there's also influence and credibility and building traction. And this allows us to have that debate with other community groups as well. So perhaps there's that angle as also just to play into this work as well.
I think I do appreciate that, but I think, and I appreciate all the points that have been made, and I think certainly the fact that I use transport is probably a bit unfair. If I went ahead and did all the other sections and worked it out, they probably would be a lot higher than that. I just think that the primary objective of this climate action plan is to reduce carbon. So when the cost benefit analysis is being carried out, if we're going to start taking into account other benefits like the fact that trees make people feel happy, or the fact that engaging in community groups kind of makes people feel involved, I don't think that should carry as much weight. But I appreciate, obviously, you've got access to far more in-depth information, but I just thought I'd kind of, just to follow up on your answer on that. I think Adrian wants to come in anyway, but just to follow up on that, I do think that fundamentally the most important thing here is to reduce carbon, and that might not be pretty, but ultimately we cannot we can't plant enough trees to offset the amount of carbon that we are using and the energy that we are consuming. There just aren't enough trees on the planet. You'd have to have like 2 or 3 planets to cover it. So really the only way that we are going to achieve this is by reducing energy consumption, reducing car use and things like that. So if that 2.5 million could be spent on a massive campaign getting people to get rid of their cars or transition to electric cars, or spent on EV charging points and all kinds of things like that, potentially your carbon reduction would be better, and in my view at least, the overall success of this scheme would be greater. I would at least put that to you. I don't know if anybody has a response on that, and if not, I'm happy to give way.
I think Andrew wants to.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Mario may be able to support me a little bit more on this in terms of this is the complication of the cost side of things, because again we're trying to do that to demonstrate the cost of the project, but as we said, a lot of various things, like some of the transport section as well, and many of the other sections, the costs are, a lot of them are from funding, like from grant funding, from lots of like the retrofit schemes and stuff as well. So we can't just spend the 2.5 million there. We can't just take that and spend it somewhere else. Those are set up by the government to support those kind of areas. So that's unfortunately not. We can't just transfer it across. Okay. And also, we do agree that the energy hierarchy, as you're kind of describing there in terms of reduction first, is really important, and we have added that into the one for next year. A little bit of a description around that, because obviously many people know about it, but some people don't. And we want to be focused on reduction, but we'll never achieve 100% from reducing. There will always be some residual emissions. Lots of places kind of accept that. So the carbon sequestration is a really important part to cover what is left, like I say, as well as all the other benefits.
And just to come in on, just to provide a bit of reassurance that kind of the cost per pound and the carbon saving associated with each pound, we are looking at that. So projects going forward across the different areas of the CAP, we want to see like what that, what is the carbon saving for each pound spent on different projects, because we know financially where we're at as a council, so we do need to make those decisions on what is the best, where best to spend the money. So value for money is something that we do look at it for specific projects to help in that decision making process.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear. I don't know if I'm happy to give way to Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say I entirely agree with your logical analysis, and I was going to suggest that it would be interesting to see that comparison. So kilotons saved per pound spent. So it's good to know that's being produced. I think, though, the CAP was put together sort of in the other direction. So what could we achieve, and what would we have to spend to achieve that? So if trees were the most effective thing, we couldn't throw all the money into trees because there wasn't enough land. If getting people out of their cars was the most effective thing, we couldn't solely focus on that, because there will be a stubborn residual X% who never give up their car. So I think it's quite a lot more complicated, but that pounds per kiloton saved would be a really interesting metric, and it might cast another light on the plan, which will be worth looking at as it's put together for the next update. Thanks.
So just they're at the moment it's at project level. So for example, the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund bid that we've applied for, that requires match funding. So the match funding, so we've looked at that pound, what does that mean in carbon saving, and there's other projects we've included on that. So yeah, we can definitely share that the project level at the next relevant meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have a few more. Sorry. I asked. This is a repeat of one that I asked last time, but unless I read through the questions thing too quickly, I don't think I actually got an answer to it. And it was about rehydrating wetlands and whether or not we have any peat bogs, because they're about 10 times more effective as a carbon sink than trees are. So I just wondered if we've looked into wetlands and what role they play, and the wetlands that don't currently exist that we could rewild or redirect water.
Andy?
Do you want me to pick that one up?
Yeah.
Wide ranging.
Yeah, you go ahead. I was going to mention about some of the wetland stuff we spoke about earlier, but you go ahead first.
I think the peatlands thing, that there are some peatlands in the borough. In fact, the borough council owns one of the biggest peatland sites in the borough, and that's at California Country Park at Longmoor Bog. It tends to be pretty problematic to re-wet peatlands because they tend to be dissected by other land uses, and of course the key thing with peatlands is re-wetting them, and you have to re-wet them over the whole area. You can't really, water will seek one level, won't it? So it can be problematic. We have looked, as Laura was going to say, we've looked at planting some wet woodland sites. So we've looking at the Hatch Farm dairy site we planted this year is in the floodplain, and will hopefully help both with that sort of developing wet woodland sort of site, but also in terms of the reducing the flow off the site for floodwater in times of flood. So it should have dual benefits. We have got a number of wetland sites that we have developed as part of the SANGS process over this. So there's a number of areas which we've developed wetland habitats as part of those SANGS, both in Arborfield and in, I think in North Wokingham as well. There's a bit of wetland there as well. So yeah, so it is something we look at, and it is something we look at more with that eye at biodiversity side, Alex, than at the sort of CAP side. I appreciate that but it's again, it's why I think it's a good thing to talk across both these subjects at the same time, because they're interrelated, aren't they? And things I might want to do as an ecologist will, by their very nature, have impacts in terms of their climate saving and carbon saving.
Okay, and kind of linked with this, you carried out an initial mapping exercise to identify locations that would provide habitat in wetlands. I know that my ward floods every year, and I get loads of emails about it. Is that, I just wondered what locations were in that initial mapping exercise. I'm referring to 4.2.4, the flood management partnership. Initial mapping exercise that you did. I just wondered what locations were involved in that.
Laura?
I think, yeah, so that was part of our tree strategy work. So the consultant we had on board looked at various different mapping exercises for potential planting, and one of them was riparian woodland planting. So I think the easiest way to probably answer that is that we could share those maps there were so many of those maps that it wasn't really feasible for us to include that as part of the publicised tree strategy, but that's something that we use internally to help inform our decision-making process. So probably the best thing to do is I can share that map with you, because basically it looks at the whole borough and layers that up with those identified areas with areas of WBC owned land, and then, like I said, that allows us to be able to make those informed decisions. So yeah, probably the easiest way for me to do that would be to share that map with you, which I'm happy to do.
Okay.
And in addition to that, Alex, it comes up in my area, which is the local nature recovery strategy is being developed and will be consulted on in February, I think, isn't it, Laura? I think that's the date they've got at the moment. And that is a map-based approach to identifying the areas where we want to prioritise the creation of new habitats. And part of those new habitats will be wetland habitats. And that will be out in February as a map and document-based consultation. So we'll you'll have that as well to look at. I'll make sure you get a link for it when it comes up.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I've got one last question. Sorry, I do know everyone wants to go home now. 4.2.5, the current status on this, which is about grass management, we've reduced the frequency of grass cutting, which I'm well aware of because I get lots of emails about that as well. And somehow that's cost 130,000. So I wondered, it's obviously more complicated than that, but I just wondered what exactly is going on there in terms of, essentially, from my understanding, what we're doing is instead of trimming grass down to the bottom, we're kind of letting it grow to allow it to become, sort of meadow-like. But presumably there's other work going on, which is why it's costing 130,000. I just wondered what was going on there, because to me it seemed like reduced grass cutting is saving the council money. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not fully versed in where the figures came from this, Alex, but I can leave that with Andrew. But in general principles, when we're looking at changing the grassland management, it's not always necessarily a reduction in cost. It can actually be about the same cost, because you go from being just a cut and drop to a cut and collect if you're looking at grassland meadow management. So there are some times when, if you're doing that, then the management costs aren't that much different. The other side of it is if we're going for the dual benefits, it may be we're capturing as well, Andrew, the cost of wildflower seeding, which is maybe the capital cost of getting those grasslands to be more attractive as well as longer, effectively, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for example, like from the waste team and stuff, in terms of the reduced grass cutting for certain areas, that is actually saving money. But again, I'd have to go back to the exact of the cost. It was a little bit of time ago now, but it is from additional work in terms of it's kind of a lumped together action that, which maybe isn't ideal in terms of like expanding other areas, which is like say likely where the cost is coming from the additional work from that.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't take up any more time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Andy.
Does anyone mind if I don't
talking.
do my don't do my introductory spiel again and just say you've had a report and I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Yes, Caroline was first, I think.
Thank you. It's great that we're planting so many trees. That's wonderful. But what do we do about making sure we look after saplings that we're planting? Because I understand there's been vandalism around some that have been planted in Ashenbury Park, and also making sure they're watered if we don't get enough.
So I'll let Laura come back and talk to you about the vandalism and the replanting. With regards to watering, a lot of the tree planting projects that Laura and I undertake are using whip planting. So we plant at the smallest size because they have the highest rate of establishment and they will outstrip larger trees that within 5 years. So it's the best way of planting trees is to plant the smallest. And when you plant the smallest, it's very unlikely if you plant them properly and in the right season that you will need to water them. We did have a very, very dry summer a couple of years ago, and we went to Overview and Scrutiny and got asked about the fact the whole hedgerow was dead. And when we looked at it, actually it was very good. Even in a really dry summer, we had about an 85% success rate, which is acceptable when you're looking at hedgerows. Laura, in terms of Ashenbury Park itself?
Yeah, so Ashenbury Park is one of the schemes that was planted about March 2024, and that's part of the schemes being delivered as part of this action, and all of those schemes have been subject to a minimum of a 3-year management and maintenance programme. So that's been incorporated into the contractor and the work that's been carried out. So the way we do it is normally in summer, and then at the beginning of winter there are checks carried out to check what type of vandalism has been carried out, whether there is any trees that need replacing physically, or stakes, guards, any remulching that's required. So all of that is incorporated into a plan, an establishment plan for those schemes, which Ashenbury Park is part of.
And we'll be doing some bulking up of the planting this season, won't we, at Ashenbury?
Yes, yeah. So actually just before Christmas, that site was included in some of the replacement plantings that was following some of the checks that were carried out in about October time. So yeah, that would have been carried out. But again, that will be subject to another check sort of come summer to see how they've sort of established over winter as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you want to go?
Katrine.
Just want to say thanks very much, Andy. I think I guess what I got most from the report was there's clearly a lot of work going on anyway, but the structuring of it in a similar way to the CAP is a combination. Well, one, I think we need to question if that's actually needed, wanted, but there's definitely a resource constraint, particularly thinking around how it's the adding ecological implications to reports and decisions that are being made, which I think feels like one of the most rigorous process steps that we as a council can take to ensure that ecological considerations are considered in kind of across the board decision making. But clearly it'll be good to see that in the future, and I think it's actually really important, kind of contrary to what Alex was saying before, it's great for us to be considering both because they are so intertwined, but also you can't have one without the other. But also I think the ecological side is one that actually feels a lot more tangible to people, and perhaps we as a local government can actually have more influence on, or it can really come together to life for people. So perhaps that's something that, as we think about how we maybe make the ecological, or spread the ecological emergency through council processes, how can we piggyback on some of the CAP things? I think as is already happening, but maybe make that a little bit more established. The one area I don't know if you'd be able to speak to briefly is around the biodiversity net gain units and I guess the opportunity that you see for the council here, because given that resources are very tight, what level of work has been done to understand how big that opportunity could be, or is it still fairly early days in terms of the regulation and our reaction to it?
It's still quite early days. Mandatory net gain only came in 2024. I think in April's the last date it all came in. But we have been doing a load of work behind the scenes to both cost the delivery of biodiversity net gain units on our site. So one of the sites was at Ashenbury Park, which you talked about, and we have done a costing for that, and we've delivered some units there. We're about to go through the process of registering them with a responsible body, and at that point we will know roughly what the actual cost of delivery is. At the moment, I am saying to developers, you can buy our units for about £50,000 each on these medium distinctiveness units. And at the moment, I'm not getting any pushback. I suspect that's because we're the only provider in town at the moment. And they know also that they don't actually have to buy them until they actually implement their schemes. So I think that the market will mature, but I cannot see the price going down a lot, and I cannot see that it won't be a profitable business for us. And the profit for us is different to private landowners, which makes us more attractive, which is that, if I go to a private landowner, they're going to want some form of land value element because they're tying up their land for 30 years. We are much less sensitive as long as we use land that is, currently public open space or not used for other things, then we are not quite so sensitive around that land value. And, we can probably be competitive in that market selling B&G units. The other side of it, the uncertainty is still there. I think there is going to be quite a high demand for units, but because every different development site is specific in terms of what it needs, it's very hard to predict the actual need. But just to give an example, though, they can be really, really varied. So you can have a very large site and the need is very minimal, or you can have a single roundabout, which I've seen an example of, that needs 11 units to mitigate its impact. And you can start to see that, even on quite a small footprint, that if you're destroying the wrong habitats, then that need can be quite high. So I do expect there to be a fairly large need, and the government seems to be endorsing the B&G approach and that market-led approach. So I think it is something that we will get a profit from. It's much harder, Catherine, to see exactly when that profit comes in. I would expect us to see us actually get receipts in 25-26 from selling B&G. We didn't get any actual receipts in this financial year yet, but I would say in next financial year I'd expect to see it.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, you said sort of a £50,000 quote. Is that being used? I guess developers are almost putting it in their financial models to be like, well, we don't know, let's use that, but no commitments either way. So if, as and when they need it, we realise that the value is significantly higher, then I guess we can realise that. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. We have to. It's such a new market. What you might say to someone is, I'm trying to put a figure in a section 106 that's higher than what I'm seeing other people selling them at the moment, so that they will, if they say yes and they buy them at that, we're quids in. If they say that they can get it cheaper, we've got somewhere to go in terms of negotiation if we need to. But as each year, I would say we need to review this approach, and that's what I'll be suggesting to our commercial team who are involved in this, which we need to review what those prices are, because it will be guided both by the type of habitat and the local market and demand. So it will change year on year, I think.
Okay. I was going, yeah, I think you were first.
I'm happy to go next. Thanks. Hi, Andy. We're always victims of calling something an emergency because it implies that everything should happen straight away at the expense of anything else. I noticed in the action plan a few references to MTFP 26-27. Yep. So a couple of questions. What sort of scale of resource are we looking for to do this work? And was it considered for the current MTFP and therefore not successful, I assume, by the fact we're looking for it next year?
It wasn't considered for the current MTFP, Adrian. It is something that we weren't sure about the actual resource requirements because the government is currently giving us some funding to look at BNG particularly, called the New Burdens funding. So we're getting that at the moment to help with the sort of preparations for BNG and getting ourselves in a regulatory side. We're getting ready for it. If that goes on, and at the moment they haven't indicated, then we met the business case we would need, and then the resource need would be less. But I suspect, like you probably do, that the New Burdens funding will disappear pretty quickly, and that's why we've waited until next year's medium-term financial plan rather than doing this one's. In terms of the level of resource, at the moment, our estimate is it's mainly the things that Catherine mentioned, that if you put an ecological implications box on every single executive report, that's easy to do, but what it means is every single exec report needs to go to my ecologist, and I don't have enough resource to do that at the moment. But the problem I think is that I think we probably need, for those things we're not able to do at the moment, an additional post would probably be sufficient. But it would have to be a little bit of a case of let's see what the actual workload is like once we implement it. I suppose it might go beyond that eventually, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
Moses.
I think my question is too dissimilar to what Adrian just asked. I was just wondering, talking about additional resources, are we just doing things that looks nice sounding, but we're not actually getting value in terms of the resources that we spend?
Do you mean what we're doing already, you mean?
No, I'm looking at what you talk.
Sorry, I've lost sound.
I'm saying that you talked about, I'm looking at your point number 4 here, reestablish the working and biodiversity forum. So I'm just wondering whether we are just incurring unnecessary additional resources because some things look nice sounding, but in terms of value for money, it doesn't quite add up.
The actions, well, I think that it's about putting the ecological emergency at the heart of decision making and at the heart of the community. Now, we used to have a biodiversity forum, and you've seen the example of the power of community action in an earlier presentation about energy schemes. And I think that we want to try and bring some of that kind of energy to the ecological emergency. And when we were running a biodiversity forum previously, we probably set up, I think, 4 or 5 different community groups, including the Wokingham District Veteran Tree Association, which is probably the largest community group in the borough. And that meant that we have a fantastic database of every single old or veteran tree in the borough, courtesy entirely of local volunteers going out and doing those surveys. So I think that whilst it can look like a nice to do, it can have some unexpected and very good value results.
Okay, good. Any more questions on this topic, ecological emergency? Are you sure? Right. Okay, thanks ever so much, Andy and Andrew and Steve and Laura. Thanks for coming. And we're get on to the work programme now.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay, on the work programme, I think we were talking in the pre-meeting about the fact that we probably have too many things for February. And the solar farms was carried over from January, not January, the last meeting. I mean, it was the last meeting, wasn't it? It was meant to be this meeting. So we need to do solar farms. So what we were sort of thinking of was maybe having a meeting sometime between the 25th of February and the, when was it, in June, the next meeting? Can you remember? 10th of June, it's quite late, there isn't one in May. So we'll have to think about a date for that, but... Well, yeah, we can do it any time between the 25th of February and June.
Well, the annual council meeting, probably.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess April.
Yeah, April-ish. Or even the end of March.
Can we request, unless, I don't know, feedback, if I think particularly the amount of stuff, and also on the action tracker, there's quite a lot of things to come back that have been tagged as February, so we might struggle. So perhaps we could request Neil to suggest, look at the I'm sure there's a pretty dense schedule for some options. And
there's also this, the outcome of this, the bus shelter issue that we need to talk about at some stage. Maybe, you know, talking about should we have an ethical and low carbon advertising policy.
So can I suggest that the chair and the vice chair have a discussion with those outside the meeting and look at prioritising what's coming up next month, and then maybe a potential date for a further meeting before the end of the municipal year? And we can then circulate details to members.
Just as long as solar farms remains on the 25th of February.
Yes, that's what I said first.
Yeah, yeah.
But
just
solar farms needs to.
Can I ask on that item that we we get details of the additional solar farms where they are? Because I've asked for that previously but not been given it yet. So I know. So there are plans presumably because it's in the MTFB and other plans. So if we can have full details of the other solar farms, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I can ask David to provide that.
Okay. And, well, yes, and you also mentioned the action tracker, Katrine, that there's several things that will be needing to be reported on in February. So can you think of anything else, Neil, on the action tracker? But, I mean, you weren't there at the pre-meeting, so we...
Well, as I said, we can discuss this outside the meeting and update members for the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Chair, was that a question about actions from this meeting, or?
Well, it's actions that are on the action tracker that need to come back to.
Yeah.
You know, there's several for February.
Are we coming on to summarise actions from this meeting then?
I guess we should.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you got something to say?
Would you like me to suggest a couple?
Yes,
well, they're just the things I think we agreed, which was to get some insight into investment per kilotonne of CO2 saved from at project level, which Mary said you're working on.
Yeah, so I can look at that and just see, I don't know, you know, it's just making sure there's no sensitive information in there because obviously costs are included, so it might not be, I mean, we could share the template that we use, but it may be the costs, I guess I'll have to look at what costs are in there, but maybe not, it could be circulated to members as opposed to shared in this meeting if that's fine to do. But yeah, I'll have a look and just work out the best way to share that.
And then it was just about making sense of the 170 hectares of trees planted by 2030, which appears in the CAP as a hard target, but the team don't seem to be treating it as such. So what's the clarity on that?
And we can look at that as part of that, wider update of the CAP for this year, so we can look at that, refine it, and then when the full CAP comes to this committee group, that update can be in there and we can highlight it.
And should we have an action on a community energy organisation? What should we? I mean, you know, it was an interesting presentation, and we were all excited by it. So, what are we actually going to do?
I think Mary summarised some actions that she and the team are taking. So is that something perhaps you could update us on, not in the February meeting, but a subsequent, you mentioned around the January report, so on, and or I guess it will be in the next CAP update.
Yeah, that might be the best. When we update the CAP with the current status, it feels like the update in there will probably be the best place to update rather than providing a separate update. And I can, again, that can be highlighted at the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Moses.
I just wanted to ask: is part of the action to reflect performance-based RAG rather than action-based? Because at the moment, we don't seem to have an idea of the progress that is being made with the action that is proposed. So it shows green, but in terms of performance, if you use KPI, so that's what I thought Alex was proposing. Are we going to be doing that?
Yeah, so this is part of that wider CAP update. So we recognise there's been a number of comments over the committees around the RAG and what it means, and you know that clarity's not really there. So we want to look at refining that. So we're looking at putting project stages against actions, and then it's potentially RAG status against the overall action. But again, we can share that with you at the as part of the update to the CAP progress report.
Yeah, it's in the record of actions from the transport discussion to do that, and to include the return to green status as well. So what would it need to be green if it's something else? So I'm happy it's captured, and we're going to pick it up at a was this on the February meeting? Was it all?
So I don't think February. I think so. Every year, before the CAP will go to full council, it will come to this meeting. This is what's happened in the past. So we will share with you all that the update. So there'll be updates to all the actions, but also the comments that have been received in these meetings, as well as conversations with officers, and we'll kind of look at updating the CAP. I think the key is like getting the balance. Like we want to have. It sounds like everyone wants it to be simple and it really clear so people can engage with it, but also we want information in it. So it's getting that balance of not too much information, that it's too much and people can't engage with it, but enough that people, you know, most people get what they need from it. But so it is a challenge to manage that, but we're looking at it, and we will present that to you. I don't think at the February meeting. I think the next meeting whenever it's planned.
Yeah, there's an agenda item in the February meeting at the moment, which I think we're about to juggle. It says following deliberations and recommendations during the year to make recommendations for inclusion in the emerging 2025 CAP update, which I think is what we're talking about. Is that the same item? Yeah. So whether that's February or April, I'm not bothered, but as long as we're coming to it fairly soon.
Yeah.
It's just a general comment or observation. Maybe I'm a bit pedantic. I just have a bit of difficulty when I read this report. It keeps saying we've done this year. This year may not be this year when you go to 2026. So is there a way we can write it better so somebody can know like specific time frames? Because when you say this year and we've left 2024, it's difficult to know what this year relates to now when you look at the report. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Probably the borough financial year, I would think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something we can look at as well. Again, it's that we want it to be as clear as possible so people look at it. So if we do notice that, we can try and put in those specific dates so it's, you know, it's really clear what's happened when over what time frame.
It's better to say we did this between April 2024 and June 20, and say this year, because this year hasn't got a meaning, because the year is not static.
I think we have. Yes, we've got to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Murray, for attending and all your help. Thanks for all your